Kia ora team, my name's Ben and this is
Mana.
and this is
Logan.
and we're going to talk today about the structure of muscle. How do you like boys? Okay, Logan,
Yes.
what is this?
That is a bone.
It certainly is. And what attaches a muscle to a bone?
A tendon.
Gorgeous. So then this must be our
Muscle.
Good. This muscle has been chopped in half so we can see its layers. So a muscle is divided into
Vesicles.
fascicles, and a fascicle has lots of
Muscle fibers.
good. So a muscle fiber is also called a muscle
Cell.
good. Why is it called a muscle fiber? Because it's like a normal cell that's been
Squashed and stretched.
good. Why would we want a long fiber?
So that we can contract and opposite of contract.
Good. So if I've got a long cell, it can contract a long way and it can stretch a long way. The thing that's special about a muscle cell is that it can contract. So the thing that's special inside the muscle cell that does contract is called the
Myofibrils.
very good fibril, because it's a little fiber. So if we start from the biggest thing, start from the biggest thing, the whole thing is the
Muscle.
a muscle is broken down into many
Vesicles.
fascicles contain
Cells.
which are known as
Muscle
Muscle
fibers.
the special thing inside a muscle fiber that contracts is the
Myofibrils.
myofibril. Fibril, little fiber. A myofibril is made of many
Myofilaments.
good myofilaments, and we have two proteins which are our myofilaments, and they are
Actin.
which is thin and light,
Yep.
and
Myosin.
which is thick and dark. Okay. And if we look and we draw lots of them in a row, we can have a row that's got dark, then light, then dark, then light. And that's going to show on our myofibril, and it's stripy, so it's striated. If we look at just one of these segments, in the middle of our actin, which is our thin filament, it's called the Z disc. In the middle of the next actin is the Z disc. So from the Z to the Z is called a
Sarcomere.
sarcomere. So the smallest unit that contracts is a sarcomere.
Yes.
Okay, now, because we've got lots and lots of layers, we've got to hold them in place with some glad wrap. So, what is the name of the layer, the glad wrap that wraps around the whole muscle?
The epimyosin.
Gorgeous. Because epi means
Around.
over,
Over.
and above.
Or above, yeah.
So it's over and above the whole muscle. Then, the muscle is broken into
Vesicles.
fascicles. So what's the thing that goes around the fascicle?
Perimyosin.
Gorgeous. So peri means
Around.
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 So perimysium, mysium must be,
Glad wrap stuff.
yeah, peri around the muscle. Good. Perimyosin, round muscle. Epimyosin, above muscle.
Over. Muscle.
Over, nice. And then the glad wrap that goes around the muscle fiber.
Endomyosin.
Gorgeous. Because endo means
Inside.
good, deep within, inside. Okay, let's one more time from the biggest structure to the littlest structure. The whole thing's called
Muscle.
muscles broken into many.
Vesicles.
Fascicles contain lots of
Muscle fibers.
the thing that contracts inside a muscle fiber.
Myofibrils.
A myofibril is made of two proteins, which are,
Actin. Myosin.
and they are called,
Myofilaments.
and then a myofilament is many
Z discs.
Oh, so from a Z to a Z disc.
Sarcomere.
Many sarcomeres in a row.
Nice.
Boom!
Boom.
Kia ora team, my name is Ben and this is
Kevin.
And today we're going to go through the sequence of events that have to occur before we get a muscle contraction. Rightio, let's swap places. What am I drawing?
Axon.
Good. So this is the axon of a motor nerve. So the axon is the bit of the nerve that conveys the message to the muscle in this case. What transmits down a motor nerve?
A action potential.
Good. Action potential carries the message to the...
Axon terminal.
What does terminal mean?
End, death, coming.
Good. So the end. Axon terminal, end of the axon. So when it reaches the axon terminal, what's released?
Calcium.
Good. Calcium's released and it binds to the...
Synaptic vesicle.
Good. Synaptic vesicle. A synapse is where an axon or a nerve talks to another nerve or a muscle. And the synaptic vesicle contains...
Acetylcholine.
Good. Acetylcholine is an excitatory neurotransmitter. What's neuro?
Nerves.
Good. So neurotransmitter transmits a message from a nerve. So the message, which is a
Action potential.
comes down the axon to the
Axon terminal.
then,
Releases calcium.
which binds to the
Synaptic vesicle.
then the synaptic vesicle
Goes to the axon terminal.
and releases.
The neurotransmitter. ACH or acetylcholine.
Good. And the message goes across the
Synaptic cleft.
good synapse, a nerve talking, cleft,
Gap between.
gap, and it hits receptors on the
Motor end plate.
good motor end plate. The motor end plate is a special bit of the sarcolemma, which is the
Around the muscle.
good. So it's the cell wall of a muscle fiber. When acetylcholine hits the receptors, it starts off a new,
Action potential.
which goes around the
Sarcolemma.
good. So now we've got a problem. The message is shooting around the cell wall, the muscle fiber wall, sarcolemma, but what are the things that contract?
The muscle fibers inside.
Yeah, the little fibers, the
Fibrils.
fibril, little fiber. So we need to get the message to the myofibrils, which inside. So the sarcolemma folds in itself, which is called an
Vagination.
Good. So we've got an invagination of the sarcolemma, which is called the
T-tubule.
T-tubule, because it looks like a
T.
T. Okay, so our message goes along the sarcolemma, down the...
T-tubule.
to stimulate the...
Sarcoplasmic reticulum.
Woo! Sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is like a little bucket which holds...
Calcium.
Good. So when the sarcoplasmic reticulum gets...
Stimulated.
then it releases
Calcium.
from the...
Terminal cisternae.
Good. So the terminal cisternae is the end of the bucket, sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, so calcium is now released inside the muscle fiber. Now, if we go down into the myofibril, the bit that contracts in the muscle, the myofibril is made of two proteins, myofilaments, and they are,
Actin.
good, which is a thin filament.
With binding sites.
Yep,
And myosin. Which
Which-
has the heads to attach.
good. So here's our myosin, here's our actin. Actin and myosin constantly want to bind. We can't have this because then our muscles would always be contracted. So we're going to have to stick something in the way to stop them from binding. So we've got a long skinny thing that wraps around the actin.
Tropomyosin.
Good. Tropomyosin, long skinny word, long skinny filament. This long skinny filament needs something to hold it in place. So we've got a short stocky one.
Troponin.
Troponin. Short stocky word, short stocky filament. So now, actin and myosin can't bind, which is a problem. Because then our muscles are constantly
floppy.
good. Okay, back up to where we were. Calcium is released. Calcium then binds to the,
Troponin,
which pulls the
tropomyosin away.
tropomyosin away from the
Actin binding sites.
binding sites on the actin. So now,
Myosin heads can attach to the actin binding sites.
gorgeous. So up he comes. And then for contraction to occur, we need,
ATP,
which is a store of
energy.
boom! Okay, one more time. For a muscle to contract, we need a
Action potential.
good, which is a message, and the message travels down to the,
Axon terminal.
and then
Calcium is released.
which binds to the,
Synaptic vesicle.
which then fuses to the,
Axon terminal ending.
good. Then,
Sends it across the synaptic cleft.
and what is sent across?
The acetylcholine, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter.
Good. Acetylcholine then binds to receptors on the,
Motor end plate.
which create a new,
Action potential.
which goes along the,
Sarcomere.
and then it has to get inside via the,
T-tubules.
so the action potential goes down the T-tubule and stimulates the,
Sarcoplasmic reticulum.
then
Calcium is released via the terminal cisternae.
calcium then binds to the,
Troponin,
which then pulls the,
tropomyosin away.
from the,
Actin binding sites.
which allows the,
Myosin heads to attach to the actin binding sites.
then we need
ATP to cause the contraction.
done burger. Boom! Kia ora team, I have assembled the A team to talk about muscle contraction. My name is Ben, this is
Logan. Mana.
Kevin.
And Jess.
Alright, let's do this. Alright, just first. So, for a muscle to contract, we need a thin, light filament. And his name?
Is actin.
And on actin, we have binding sites. So this is a love story between two characters, our thin, light,
Actin.
and our thick, dark.
Myosin.
Alright, so actin and myosin always want to bind. So the myosin head always wants to bind to the binding sites on actin. If this happened all the time, what would our muscles be like?
Contracted.
Yeah, we'd constantly be bound together. So we can't have this, so we need someone to keep these young lovers apart. Come enter
Tropomyosin.
tropomyosin, which is a long skinny filament which then keeps myosin away. But it's long and skinny and it needs someone to help keep it away and to help it bind onto actin. So we have
Troponin.
troponin is a short fat molecule that holds tropomyosin onto the actin to cover up the binding sites. So now when myosin comes in, it can't bind. So if this was always the way, what would our muscles be like?
Floppy.
Floppy. So we need to contract our muscles. So the next star of the show comes in and his name is
Calcium.
calcium. Calcium binds to the,
Troponin.
which then pulls the
Tropomyosin.
out of the way of the,
Actin.
and the,
Binding sites.
on the actin. So now
Myosin.
heads can attach to the binding sites on actin. Then we need ATP, which is our energy source, so that the myosin heads can contract the muscle. Shot team!
Yeah!
Kia ora team, we're back again, and this time we're going to do it on the floor. So my name's Ben.
Jess.
Mana.
Logan. And Kevin.
Alright, let's do this. So, our two molecules, our young lovers, in our myofibril are
Actin.
and actin has
Binding sites.
and
Myosin.
myosin always wants to bind to the binding sites. And if we look at this, this is similar to our diagram of actin and myosin. So the thing that stops actin and myosin binding is
Tropomyosin.
good. Tropomyosin is a long, skinny word, just like the tropomyosin molecule. We need something to hold it in place, so in comes
Troponin.
troponin is a short, fat molecule, just like the word troponin. Then, when we want a muscle to contract, we need
Calcium.
to be released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Calcium binds to the,
Troponin.
which then pulls the
Tropomyosin.
out of the way of the,
Actin binding sites.
so
Myosin head.
can then bind to the,
Actin binding sites.
and then we need
ATP.
ATP to release energy so we can have a contraction.